How's it going out there, folks? So, for those of you that don't follow me on Twitter and have been living under a rock for the past couple of days, though this is a relatively recent event, I'm sure it's been all over the news, although I don't watch mainstream media. I'm assuming it has been, at least, judging by the sources I've dug up. And I will continue to dig up sources on this particular topic until I feel like it's been resolved. So, if there is a part 2 to this, it'll be this title part 2 slapped onto the end of it. But until then, I am assuming I'm only going to do one video on this. So this is more or less about simply the whole Syria debacle with the recent attack that just happened a few days ago. And as I have professed a multitude of times, I didn't support Trump for the Republican nomination. I actually supported someone else for the Republican nomination. But in fact, I was actually for Austin Peterson getting the Libertarian ticket. As we all know, history happened. Austin Peterson did not get a Libertarian ticket. It was Gary Johnson, and Trump won the Republican nomination. Regardless, I still voted for him. That's a bit of history that most of the people that watch this channel should be aware of by now. And I have issues with Trump as it stands even to this day. And maybe someday I'll make a video of them all compiled together. It might be a rant or something like that. But the main thing that will truly decide my stance on him wholeheartedly, which as of right now is less than exuberant, we'll say. The thing that will ultimately decide this is how he, and by extension the USA, reacts to the Syrian chemical attack that happened on the 7th of April in Domo. And yes, I realize I'm probably butchering that, but regardless of my terrible reading of other nations' city names, let's dive into this. So after the alleged attack, as of right now, it's not a confirmed attack, it's still alleged. And Moscow states that the Syrian president had nothing to do with the attack and that it was a false flag. Even going further on to state that the attack was reported on by the, quote, white helmets, end quote, which it actually, I do believe it actually technically was, which is a volunteer aid group of a few thousand workers providing aid to those affected by the war in Syria, namely on the rebel side, according to Wikipedia and History.com, as well as their website. All links in the description that includes all of the articles that I got my information from. So for those of you that have free time, go right ahead and read this for yourself. I'm not fucking joking here. RT, or Russian Today, goes on to claim that this alleged attack is to shield terrorists and to stop negotiations between the Syrian government and the rebels. This attack coming before the rebels and the Syrian government were going to have talks, I'm assuming, for some form of peace. But who knows where that went. But my video today isn't going to be a rundown of the news regarding this debacle. I'm here to discuss the foreign relations and the effects of war and give my overall stance as a whole on it. As Nikki Haley, U.S. ambassador to the UN, claims that the U.S. will act alone if need be, making it seem even more like we're headed down a very dangerous path. And for those of us who lived through and are aware of the calamity that had ensued in the Middle East prior to 9/11, we are all more than aware that entering in any military sense to an unstable area is only going to make things worse. And of course, also acting alone, not the best idea. But that's outside of the loss of our brothers and sisters in a conflict that we really don't have skin in. I mean, yes, the attack was horrible and everything, and it's disgusting about, but we're not the world police. It's not our job. It's not the U.S.'s job to go in and fix other nations' issues. Hell, we can't even fix our own fucking issues. We have debt, we have homeless, we have civil strife brewing at every fucking turn of the dial of the clock. Excuse me, the turn of the hand of the clock. But regardless, like I said before, that's not saying that the chemical attack isn't awful, but a knee-jerk reaction to it based solely on the emotional outrage isn't only a terrible idea because there's no concrete evidence. It's also terrible from a militaristic strategy standpoint. This, of course, strategy standpoint, and not only because we're would be entering into a conflict that we are trying to fucking stabilize a region that's already... There's no stabilizing that. The last time we got involved was during the Obama administration, and that was a fucking massive cavalcade of fuck-ups involved in that. But this is, of course, after Trump had made it clear he had intended to get troops out of Syria and let others handle it, which is great. The loss of troops we have outside of the U.S. is massive. It's a disturbingly high number. But this is, of course, Operation Iraqi Freedom is what I'm talking about. This isn't even including World War I and World War II, or the Korean and Vietnam War, which the Korean and Vietnam Wars had far less actual basis of reason behind them other than World War I and World War II. Despite World War I and World War II having somewhat logical reasons for us to have been getting involved, Pearl Harbor, World War II, and the sinking of the Lucinda in World War I. That's, of course, you do have people saying those were false flags as well, and the same thing with the Twin Towers. But regardless, just including Operation Iraqi Freedom and the total body count and loss of human life from both sides being in the realm of 1 million. There are some saying 600. There are some saying 1.2 million. I'm just going to say 1 million for the sake of, well, it being easy. And also, 1 million paints for some reason paints a much darker picture than any number before hundreds of thousands. So 500. So you get what I'm saying. You get what I'm saying here. But that alone is a large amount of people to lose their lives. Americans, brothers and sisters, to lose their lives trying to stabilize a region that inevitably we ended up not stabilizing at all, and it's actually, some could argue that it's in a worse case, and it's a worse situation now than it was when we first got there. But of course, all of the keyboard warriors and morality sign holders will disappear when the bodies start falling if this conflict does involve U.S. intervention. But as in response to U.S. sanctions on Russia, Kremlin has sent a warning, and Washington stands at attention as the world looks on with bewilderment and bated breath to see if the trigger gets pulled this time and the Cold War actually comes to fruition. Although on its somewhat hilarious note, although dark humor, it's not even going to be the U.S. versus the USSR. It's not going to be the capitalists versus the communists. But let's pull the e-brake and back up a little bit out of that dystopian future, or world future, Fallout future. I'm not saying that end is an inevitability. After all, I'm not a seer, I don't have a crystal ball, and I definitely can't see the future. I'm just saying, I'm seeing a possibility that doesn't end so well for not only the U.S., but the world in a whole. I look at it this way. To take it back full circle, all eyes are on Trump right now, and he has two simple ways to handle the event in Syria. He can listen to others acting with immediate reaction, regardless of the lack of evidence, and solely on conjecture and abstract, which, if any of our own laws and cultural norms can't be drawn off of. The concept of due process, innocence until proven guilty, that kind of thing. Except instead of a single person's innocence, we're dealing with hundreds of thousands or even millions of lives. Now this isn't. Now there is the second option, which is he can bide his time, not poke the bear, and wait to see if more evidence comes out. If it does come out that Putin was directly involved and Assad was directly involved, he can handle it in whatever way he sees fit then. I'm not a politician. I'm not a president. I'm not part of any foreign affairs. I can't give him a good solid answer as to what the second option would lead to. But I'm just saying. And also with the second option, if the proper evidence comes out and it goes to show that the attack was either caused by the rebels themselves as a way to bolster up the West and get them involved, or if it was simply as a form of terrorist organization. And simply don't put your fingers in the pot, more or less. But the sanctions already poked the bear, so I feel like my first option has already kind of wiggled its way in. But I want to reiterate something here. This isn't me saying that the attack isn't horrendous, as I've said before. Personally, I think it's disgusting. but we still shouldn't act solely on emotion. With that being said, I'm going to take some time and go off script. So bear with me here. This event could possibly end very badly. And for those of us who get a little uneasy when you start talking about the concept of the United States and Russia not being on the best of terms, two of the most major powers in the world not getting along, both of which having nuclear weapons. Yeah, most people don't think that's a good idea. That's a good thing. Most people think I should say most. Some people think that's a bad thing. But we also have to bear in mind that there's a whole group of people. We should also watch what group of people that are all gung-ho about us getting involved in Syria. The Clintonian types, if you will. Because these kinds of people, they're not in it. They're not into the idea of getting boots on the ground involved in Syria because there's some moral or physical need or outrage. They are getting involved because wars create money. And I say this because not only do you have money in the sense of the resources you acquiesce when you take over a region, though some would say that in the case of Operation Iraqi Freedom, we didn't get a whole lot out of that in the ways of resources. We didn't even get any land acquisitions. But regardless, I'm going to assume that this would happen in much in a similar sense of Iraqi freedom, where boots on the ground are involved. And instead of in this situation where we only have to deal with the local issues, we also deal with the more social political issues immediately in response to Putin and Iran. So that being said, war is also a moneymaker, specifically for politicians, because it opens up the ability to launder a lot of crooked money, amongst other things. Crooked money, ability to drum up opposition, ability to drum up votes, ability to get people all pumped up and ready to go in the affair, as we saw before with 9/11 and World War I and World War II. When you get people involved in an emotional sense, they tend to overlook some of the other glaring issues. Like I said before, though, World War I and World War II had more of a solid case to enter. We weren't attacked on our own soil. We didn't have a bombing. We didn't have a torpedoing of a ship, of a Navy vessel. What's going to be happening in this situation is we're going to be getting emotionally involved for the sake of another nation, to attempt to fix a nation that is fundamentally broken because they themselves had an attack happen on their soil. And we think that we're going to go in and fight on the right side, when inevitably what's going to happen is shit's going to hit the fan, everything's going to be all fucked up, everything's going to fall to ruin, even if we do fix it, even if we do put in place safeguards like we have done before, and it ends up falling apart anyway. Let's say that we do win. Let's say we kick Russia out, and Russia leaves, but they don't intend to be on warfare-like terms with the U.S. Let's say that. Let's use that hypothetical. Syria is still going to end up being destabilized in the future again. It's gonna turn to shit, and we're gonna have a whole another group of people that don't care for the U.S., hate the U.S., and have no issues whatsoever with being radicalized. So no, I don't think we should have a knee-jerk reaction to something that is genuinely, and I can agree with it, is genuinely horrendous. But I view this in the same light as I view school shootings. You don't act in a knee-jerk reaction because your knee-jerk reaction tends to be instinctual, emotionally driven, and dumb. So I'm begging the President of the United States and the West in general to bide their time and allow evidence to be accrued properly. Anyway, with that said, I'm going to leave this video here. I will see you glorious cunts, well, when I see you. Have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, and or night.